I'm Chance Dorland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com, joined once again by San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young. We've been mixing things up the last several weeks. Great to have you back, Jabari, for the big news, talking Kawhi Leonard, apology, thank you letter, however you want to brand this. Some fans were upset. Some people thought it was nice. What do you think? Was there any justifiable outrage from this letter?
Well, I can't say it was an apology letter. It definitely wasn't that. It was basically a letter that Kawhi felt he wanted to put out to say thank you to the fans. And I understand people are going to be angry at it. I'm sure when he wrote that letter that he would expect that. I'm sure some people I've saw they appreciated it, but it is what it is at this point, and I've seen I've viewed some of the responses to the letter, and you shake your head at it because you say on the one hand, like, okay, yeah, it's late. Yeah, it's late. But with a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who is very reserved, not necessarily the most vocal person, it's almost like, okay, yeah, it's late, but it's better late than never. And so the responses you get, you see people and they say, oh, well, take your letter and shove it. We don't want it, and I say to myself, well, when did it become, when was it ever a bad time to say thank you? When was it ever a wrong time to say thank you? Even if you don't feel like the thank you is sincere, it's nothing wrong with saying thank you. It is what it is. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying thank you. It's like when you're a little kid, right? And you do something wrong and your mom and dad forces you to apologize. Everybody know you don't want to apologize. You go and say, I'm sorry, but you don't mean it, but you still got to apologize because it sounds, it's better. It lightens the mood or it maybe even lowers your punishment. You just got to do it. And in this case, Kawhi just, he had to say thank you and he did. And I just don't see anything wrong with that. And for the people that's criticizing, it was like, okay, put yourself in that man's shoes. Yeah, you may not have liked the way that he went out. You may not have liked the way that he, didn't want to play for the Spurs organization. But sometimes, and I'm not taking up for Kawhi Leonard. My only thing is this. Look at the other side of the shoe. Look at the other side. And the other side says, just because y'all gave Kawhi Leonard, or just because the Spurs handed Kawhi, not handed, I should say, just because the Spurs wanted to give Kawhi Leonard the franchise and, the torch was passed from Tim Duncan to Kawhi Leonard. Yeah, in a perfect world, that sounds great. We all would want that, right? I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. I still want to cover Kawhi Leonard. I want that man to be here, in San Antonio, but at the same time, he's not. But that doesn't mean that Kawhi Leonard wanted that. It doesn't mean that just because, a franchise was ready to pass the torch that he wanted that torch. He was a guy that said, you know what? Thank you, but I think I want to go somewhere else. I don't want this torch here, and there's nothing wrong with that. People might be offended by it, and I understand that, and that's fair. But again, all the dude said was thank you. When did thank you become wrong? When did it become wrong? When did thank you become this bad thing to do? For those people who saying, oh, he should have kept his mouth shut and not said thank you. Well, you'll be the same people that's saying, why did he didn't even come out and say thank you to the fans? It's like a no-win situation. The letter happened. It was written. He wrote it. He submitted it to the San Antonio Express News. We put it out, and it is what it is. At the end of the day, I just don't see what's wrong with somebody saying thank you. I think what the outrage is that people were expecting or they wanted to see another word in there. They didn't want to see just a thank you. They wanted to see apology or sorry. That's what they wanted to see. And sorry, Kawhi Leonard has nothing to apologize for in his eyes. The Spurs they never apologized for anything. And they were the same people that was on record that said what? That they could have handled things differently. I'm sure Kawhi Leonard could have handled things differently. But at the same time, the Spurs said thank you to Kawhi Leonard for the fact that he helped them win a fifth championship, right? The team said thank you for everything that he's done. He's been nothing but this, that, and the other. Greg Popovich said that. Nobody said anything about that. He said thank you. It's time to move on. Kawhi Leonard said the same thing. Thank you. It's time to move on. Whether you like it or hate it, my thing is that at the end of the day, you should never have a problem with somebody thanking you. That should never be a problem. You may not like it. It just shouldn't be a problem.
Let me give you a different perspective.
You coming with a different perspective on me? Are you serious?
As someone who is a newer fan, a newer convert to Spurs Nation, this was very, very interesting to me because you had people who, had grown up with the Spurs, had followed the Spurs much longer than myself. And then I was kind of new to the team and everything. But from my perspective, as once again, a newer Spurs fan, I was put off immediately by what Kawhi didn't do, by his inaction, by his inability to communicate on this. You talk about the Spurs franchise or the coach Greg Popovich. They were talking about this. As you mentioned, maybe they could have done things differently, but they were talking about it. They're still talking about it now. I would have been more comfortable with him not saying anything, continuing that, because it shows that maybe he's just so uncomfortable talking about this. That's just the sort of the handicap he's dealing with, and that's why he didn't talk about it before. But the fact that he has now eventually spoken about it makes me think, well, he could have spoken about it earlier. And I put the blame more in his court after the fact that he now puts out this letter, because once again, what made him wait this long? So once again, from a different perspective, I think that now thank you is a bad thing because he waited too long. He didn't take any blame. I think, as you just mentioned, the Spurs have talked about how they could have handled things differently. I didn't get that from him. I thought that this was a little bit just trying to make him look a little bit better, trying to try to improve his image a little bit. This didn't seem sincere to me. Now, once again, that's just my perspective. I'm fully able to admit that I might be 100% wrong, but that's a different perspective that I bring to it. And I can see why people would be upset, and I can see why people would say, we don't need your thank you letter after what you've did to us, after the complete lack of communication on this. I would say a lack of culpability on this in any way, shape, or form. So do you think in any way did the letter further harm his standing with the Spurs base? Obviously, you've already mentioned some people might feel similar to me.
Well, before I get to that, let me just say, and I like you, Chance, but let me just tell people this, and then people may feel the same way that you feel, which is fine. Who the hell are we or you or me or anybody in this world to tell Kawhi Leonard when or when not to say thank you? Who the hell are we to tell him that he can't say thank you? Who the hell are we to say, hey, you keep your thank you letter? The man said thank you. If you accept it, thank you. If you accept it. If you don't accept it, then don't accept it. It doesn't matter. But we are not anybody to tell another person in this world what they can't do with their career, number one, and what they do after their career, after they finish a certain stint in the city. If he wants to say thank you, then let him say thank you. If he didn't want to say thank you, don't let him say thank you. If you don't want to accept his thank you, Kawhi Leonard ain't going to be losing no sleep over that. And again, I just don't like when people try to make themselves the authority on what somebody can and can't say. I can't say, don't you say thank you. Well, who the hell are you to tell me I can't say thank you? Well, what are you doing? Okay, what have you done for the last 7 years with this organization? Were you in a gym? Were you lifting weights? Did you sit up here and did you have to do what you have to do to make sure that your body is at peak, is performing the way it's supposed to perform when it counts? Were you in a gym hitting jump shots? Were you in that gym practicing foul shots? Who the hell are you to tell me I can't do anything or say anything about my career when I want to say it? That's the only problem I have with that. You don't have to accept Kawhi Leonard's thank you. You can say, you know what, man, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't accept that thank you. Fine. Move on. But don't nobody dare tell another person what they can and can't say. That's not cool. That's not right. If you want to accept this thank you again, that's fine. But if you don't want to accept it, that's fine too.
In all seriousness, Jabari, I mean, that's all our society is now, is telling people what they can and cannot do.
But just because that's what our society is, why do we got to go by that? Why do we got to go by that? Because that's our society.
Obviously, you're very passionate about this, but my perspective would be echoing exactly what you just said. I don't accept your thank you. Thank you for giving it. But I don't accept it. But once again, I just think this shows his character, and I think makes me feel a little less happy with him than I already was, which was surprising because I'm decently upset with him for how he poorly handled this, in my opinion. So obviously you feel a little different.
Yeah, but I don't feel anything. What I'm saying is that people fail to look at both sides of it. They fail to. This is a man who was praised for always not saying anything when he was going to come up, right? Nobody's, this is a quiet guy. He's Tim Duncan. He leads by example. He doesn't need to talk. He doesn't need to say anything. But when at the same time, when you don't like something, something and you're looking for him to do exactly what you praised him for not doing. Now you want him to say something. Now you want him to speak, but you were just praising him for not speaking. You can't have it both ways. Either you're going to appreciate from somebody for what they are, or you're going to appreciate them for what they're not, or dislike them for what they're not. You got to pick one. You can't have both. Okay. You just can't. That's not, you can't have both sides of it. You can't have it. You know what I'm saying? So for those people, those same people who were criticized, I did not expect Kawhi Leonard to say thank you. I did not expect him to do any of that. When I got that phone call and when I got that letter, I was just as surprised as everybody else. Okay. But at the same time, I am nobody to tell that man that he can't say thank you. It would be one thing if he came out and he was dissing this and saying, nobody was on that's a completely different story. All that man did was say thank you. All he did was say thank you to the fans. All he did was say thank you to Greg Popovich. All he did was say thank you to the organization for 7 years. What is the problem with saying thank you? Come on, man. You got to miss me with that. I have no problem with somebody just saying thank you. It could be late. It could be next year. All he did was say thank you. When in our society have we become that low where we can't even say, you know what? I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't like it. It was late, but I appreciate it.
Interestingly enough, I actually would have thought it would have been more appropriate for him to come out and kind of air his grievances, because if he could have made me understand what he went through and why he chose, because it was a choice. And I specifically think that more now than I ever did before, because now he has broken his silence. If he had kind of made me understand why he did what he did and talked about, how he was treated or something like that, even if it wasn't something I wanted to hear, I would have appreciated that truthfulness so much more than just this, what seems, I think objectively you could make the case this seems very empty, seems very shallow, but I agree with you. What's wrong with saying thank you? I think that's a valid point, but it's not a complete,
But in that way, you kind of, it's contradicting though, Chance. It's contradicting, because at the same time, you can't say something like, I would have appreciated if he came out, even though it's not something I wanted to hear. If you don't want to hear it, then why does he gotta say anything?
Jabari, you're speaking in absolutes, man. This is very nuanced, but I just wanted to offer a different perspective. Obviously, we have a very different perspective.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it because you're speaking for a lot of people. That's the thing. You're speaking for a lot of people. One of the things I did want to do is when this letter came to the San Antonio Express News, I was like, I'm not going to get in a Twitter war or anything. I'm not responding to anybody. I want to put out what the man requested to get put out, and I'm leaving it at that. Y'all can determine what you want. My only thing is that, was it late? Yeah, it was late. And I criticized Tony Parker for being late a little bit too, even though the Players Tribune, his was, was totally good, but, it was late. But at the same time, that's just me nitpicking. Okay, something was late, but at the same time, both had their point of view that they made. Kawhi Leonard spent 7 years here. Tony Parker spent 17. If you were expecting Kawhi Leonard to go to the Players Tribune and write this whole deep essay about his time in San Antonio, you were fairly mistaken. He was never going to do that. The fact that he said thank you should shock people. And that alone should say, you know what? I didn't even expect him to do that, but whatever. It's already over. What is the use of going back and saying what Kawhi Leonard went through?
That's
why do you
half
do that?
Of the podcast as we talk about things that are over, Jabari. I mean, that's the fun of discussion.
No, but I'm just saying, like it's already over. The point is Kawhi Leonard's not here anymore. Greg Popovich said at his very press conference, it doesn't make any sense for us to go back and revisit what happened. It's over. Sure, it's done.
Because Greg Popovich said that. Just imagine if Greg Popovich had said that yesterday as opposed to when he did say that. He's been talking about this. The team has been talking about this. Kawhi Leonard has not.
There's a final nail in the coffin. He said thank you, and now then everybody can now move on. He said thank you. Everybody can move on, and we can look forward to the day that he comes back to San Antonio.
That I will agree with. This thank you letter that I don't like. You seem to have a obviously different opinion of it. I will admit that this does seem like a kind of the nail in the coffin, as you put it. This does seem like the final writing, or this does seem like kind of the final parts of this whole Kawhi saga. I completely agree with you there. Yeah.
It's over. It's over on that. But it was, listen. Like I said, don't get me wrong. Okay, because people are going to look at this and say, "Oh, nobody's taking up for Kawhi Leonard." Everybody puts out the negative and expect me to hop on the whole negative bandwagon. I'm not negative. I'm not positive. I am neutral. But I'm looking at the other side of it. Because if everybody came out and they look, and I'm just looking at the other side of it because there's been so much criticism and negativity about it. And all I'm saying is, dude, when did it become a problem for somebody to just say thank you? People are going to feel what they want to feel, and that's their prerogative to feel that way. My only problem is, like I'm saying before, there's no wrong time to do the right thing. And if the right thing is saying thank you in Kawhi Leonard's mind, who are we to say anything different? He said thank you.
And then some people have a different perspective. All right. So
absolutely. And I respect their perspective too.
What is not really so subjective is this schedule. We got the new Spurs schedule. It's been released. I want to know if anything stands out. I know specifically you think the rodeo road trip more difficult this year travel wise. So anything the Spurs should be upset about?
You know, that you look at that rodeo road trip, right? You got Sacramento, Golden State, Portland, Utah, Memphis. Then you got to go to Toronto, New York, and Brooklyn, right? You're traveling all the way across country. Last year, the Spurs had it pretty good because the majority of their rodeo road trip was all it was basically West Coast, right? You know, Denver's and all that. It was basically West Coast, and I believe if you pull up last year's schedule, they had Phoenix, Golden State, Utah, Denver twice, and then they finished in Cleveland. The majority of that rodeo road trip was what? It was West Coast bound, right? So this year, you look at the rodeo road trip, it is a little bit more tedious, okay? Because you have, you start in the West Coast. You go Sacramento, Golden State, Portland, Utah, which beat you like 3 times last year, Memphis, and then you got to go Toronto, New York, Brooklyn. To me, I'm thinking to myself, listen, if I'm a Spurs, I'm thinking like, why can't that rodeo road trip be West Coast bound again? Why do I got to travel from over here in Sacramento, Golden State? I got to go back up to the Pacific Northwest to go Portland. Then I got to come all the way back down to Utah, then go all the way to Memphis, and then go all the way to Toronto, a different damn country, then New York, and then Brooklyn. Okay? The only part about that rodeo road trip that I agree with is you get to knock New York and Brooklyn off at the same time. So you don't have to worry about coming back to Brooklyn on a different trip. I always think that if you come to Texas, if a team comes to Texas, specifically an East Coast team, you play all the Texas teams in one. If you go to New York, you play all the New York teams in one. If you go to Florida, you play all the Florida teams in one. You go to California, you play all the California teams in one. So I agree with that. But if I'm the Spurs, I'm a little bit upset at that. This rodeo road trip is just not fair. You're sending them across the country, back up to the top of the country, south of the country, down to the southwest, out of the damn country in Toronto, and then bringing them back in New York and Brooklyn. That's just not fair to me. Come on. The NBA, I think, has to do a better job with those type of long trips. You got to make it a part of a country that's just one section. Take the pressure and take some of the stress off of this type of travel with these teams that do these long road trips. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only part I didn't like. The second thing is, you go from Minnesota. I just think it's unfair to go, you start in Minnesota. And the only thing about this is good is okay, you start at home against Minnesota. Then you got to fly all the way to Portland, and then you got to see LeBron and the New York Lakers. Come on. Why do I got to go all the way to hell up there? The games 2 and 3. You know what I mean? Like, come on. The other part of it is the one thing I like is that part in November where they see Indiana, Milwaukee, Chicago, and in Minnesota. That's like all in one region. Like, that's a good trip. It's not too much travel. It's fair. You know, that part of it I do like. And then, like I said, the everything else is just, nitpicking. I like the Oklahoma City, home and away series Thursday, Saturday. I like that back, when that reaches in January. But overall, listen, we obviously know how the Spurs look at these things. They look at these schedules. Greg Popovich does. They look at these schedules as it comes in sections. The first section is that you're trying to figure guys out. You're trying to figure out who plays what, who plays better with what, or who plays better with who, I should say. What lineups look good, what rotations are fair. And that's going to take November, December. You're going to go November, December to try to figure these things out. And then in January, you're trying to figure some stuff out. Okay, I'm going to start using these lineups to see if things work. And then by February, we obviously know the Spurs use that time for the rodeo road trip to get things, try to get their cohesiveness at a ultimate high before you try to play your best basketball by February or March, because April is basically when playoffs start. So, the schedule is what it is. It's not changing. Some times may change. But I think a lot of people are upset that the fact that the Spurs have not, don't have too many national games. Me being a sports writer, I have no problem with that because that means I get in and get out at the same time I'm supposed to. But I answer that and I say this. The Spurs have had their time in the sun. They're always going to be a winning team and they're going to get national games. But as far as being the focal point of national games, when you have a team like the Lakers, who all of a sudden became relevant now with LeBron James, when you have a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, who personalities with Joel Embiid and the fact that they're a young team that's exciting to watch, the Boston Celtics, when you have these top market teams, it's hard to go to a team. And you also have not only top market teams, but you have these superstar players on these top market teams. And you have a superstar player in a team like people are going to say, oh, well, how did Milwaukee get a NBA game or a national game and the Spurs don't? Well, Milwaukee got Giannis Antetokounmpo. That dude is a superstar. He is an elite level superstar. So you got to understand where the NBA is going with this. Plus, it's not even the NBA. It's the television networks who control these things. The television networks don't want to see the Spurs. They don't. And as a fan, you shouldn't have a problem with that. You're saying, you know what? Fine. We'll see you in May. We'll see you in the Western Conference Finals. You know what I mean? It's back to the basics for us. We get to stay low key and we get to win basketball games low key and we'll be on the national games when it counts. You know what I mean? Like so I don't have any problem with the whole national thing. I understand where the league was coming from. I understand where the TV execs were coming from. When you got the top market teams with, top market ratings, you gotta, it is what it is. So I have no problem with that. I see a couple of things in the schedule that if I'm the Spurs, I'm mad about. But other than that, you know what I mean? It is what it is at this point. And, it's going to get started, soon when Minnesota opens it all up.
Look at that. We go from a point of contention to being on the exact same page. I'm behind all that, Jabari. We just got a few minutes left. Let's try to run through some questions from the fans from Facebook and Twitter. Number one here, is Derek White a true point guard or shooting guard?
I think in this day and age, I think a guy like Derek White, I call him a versatile duo guard. He's a combo guard. He can play the point. And I think, obviously with the point guard position, it's a little bit more tedious because you're in control of the offense. You're Greg Popovich's, you're his extension on the floor. So I think that I can see him playing point guard at times and I can see him trying to develop at that position, bringing the ball up. But I think right now his position is kind of like a two guard. He can bring the ball up the floor and make some decisions, but at the same time, it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get it really down pat. You know what I mean? It's going to take some time for him to get that point guard. What does it mean to play point guard for the San Antonio Spurs and Greg Popovich? I don't think that's something that Derek White, coming off of what he's coming into his sophomore season, that's something that he's not going to just pick right up. It's going to take some time for him to get that really down. But right now, I would say that he's going to spend a lot of time playing that shooting guard position. Maybe multiple times you'll see him bringing the ball up. But, he's a shooting guard right now. But I think the Spurs are wanting to develop him into a combo guard, somebody that like a Patty Mills, so they can put at the two guard as well as the point guard at any point of the game.
All right, moving along here, trying to get to as many of these as we can before we have to end today's episode. What do you think the rotation will be?
That's hard for me. Because obviously I'm not the coach. I have to see, and I think everybody has to see, it's not as easy as saying, oh, what is the rotation? It's not as easy as that. Now, obviously, coming out of the gate, you're going to probably see, the starting lineup I can envision at the center position. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Pau Gasol because Pau Gasol has pretty much made it known that he wants to start. But let's just put him in there just for the sake of putting him in there. LaMarcus Aldridge, DeMar DeRozan, DeJounte Murray, obviously, and then Rudy Gay at the three. So I think that's your starting five to start off the season. But the rotation is going to be different. Obviously, if Manu Ginobili comes back and, as I'm told, the Spurs still have not heard from him on what he's going to do. But remember something, he is under contract. So come training camp, he has to report, you know what I mean? Or they're going to be making some phone calls. So that's that. He's going to be in a mix. Marco Bellinelli is going to be in a mix. Patty Mills is going to be in a mix coming off the bench. Those three guys, are going to be there. It's now coming down to, okay, where do you play them at? What lineups do you want to use them at? And I think time will tell that. Time will tell to see how guys gel with one another. Obviously, I can envision Marco Bellinelli and Manu Ginobili. I can see them on the court a lot together because they work so well together. They know each other's game based off of when Marco Bellinelli played here back before. Last time he was here, 2014. So he knows how to play with Manu Ginobili. And I think that Manu Ginobili, and Patty Mills, I can envision those three being off the bench, being in the same lineup for the majority for longer periods of a game than any other combination off the bench. But it's going to take time. It's that, that's something that right now I'm sure Greg Popovich is preparing to ask his staff when they have their, annual coaching retreats coming up soon. What do they envision? And it's going to take some chemistry. It's going to take learning to see where guys play with each other. Where does Davis Bertans fit in and all of that? They have a lot of young guys. And I think, Greg Popovich, I really think that he's going to try to utilize that young talent this year, kind of like what he's done, last season when he was playing the Brent Forbeses of the world. So it's like I said, it's hard to tell what the rotation is going to be right now. But like I said, I told you my starting five, and that's what I think the starting five is going to be.
Speaking of all the young players, who do you think is going to have a breakout season this upcoming time around?
I'm thinking DeJounte Murray will be very, very good. I mean, when you give a guy second team all defense like he was, that's like that. Imagine what that does to a mindset. Imagine what that does to boost your confidence. That's really good for him. And I think that he's really, excited and wants to prove even more that he is one of those guys who's trying to be a great player in this league. So I'm thinking that he's going to have another breakout year, kind of built off of where he left. And listen, I'm going to be really paying attention to DeJounte Murray this year, because for the first time since he's got here, he doesn't have to turn around. The Spurs gave him the keys. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. The Spurs gave him the keys, okay? And they said, this is your show. You got to run it. Tony Parker's gone. There's no more Tony Parker. He's out of here. So with that said, DeJounte is running the show, and I really want to see how he handles that. And I'm expecting a great season out of him. I think that it's going to be, a pretty good season. Like I said, it's going to be obviously one of those situations where, he's going to have to learn and still learning more. And looking at a couple of clips from the summer league, it's not summer league, but, clips that he's put online or people's put online about his off season. It looks like that jumper is a little bit more, he looked like he's shooting it with more confidence now. And I think that's, one of a key step into improving that jump shot. And if he can prove early that jumper is good, I think it's going to be a good season, because we know he can get to the rim at will. He don't no problem getting to the rim. So I'm curious. That's going to be one of the guys I'm going to be paying attention to. I'm thinking that he's going to pick up where he left off and continue into that path of him attempting to be a great player in this league.
Excellent. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Fun discussion. And I think, as you mentioned, moving on, stuff's happened, it's time to move on. I think that's the thing we definitely both can agree on here. So, and as I begin the episode today, Jabari, we've been mixing things up, having some of your colleagues on the program. Perhaps we'll have some kind of panel discussion at some point. We'll have multiple voices. But yeah, it's been fun to mix things up. And yeah, definitely, that would be great. Have a different person on the podcast from time to time, but always going back to the original Spurs insider, Jabari Young, San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter. Great to have you back here on the program. And we'll probably be talking with you again next week.
Thank you, Chance. And I will send you a thank you letter for having me, for being back on the podcast. I really appreciate that.
We talk so much. I would find your thank you letter so warm and purposeful and appropriate for our relationship. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. I
appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all to the listeners, too, for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. That's coming from the heart. Thank you.
Oh boy, what a discussion. A big thank you, not a letter, but a verbal thank you to San Antonio Express News Spurs beat reporter Jabari Young for joining me once again for another episode of the Spurs Insider, brought to you by expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Storland.